been held in your hands from the moment that I wake up until I lay my head. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Yeah. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Want my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Yeah. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. We believe in your faithful God. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Let me sing that again. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God.
everybody. So we've been talking about the different giants in our lives that kind of stop us from pursuing God, that kind of knock us down, that keep us beat down. And I want to talk about a specific giant tonight. This is going to be really the last night that we really consider specific giants. But the giant that I want to talk about tonight is one that affects a lot of people, and that is the giant of addiction. Now, before you're tempted to say, let me just turn this off because I don't have an addiction, just stick with me for a minute. Because typically when we think about the word addiction, we think about the big three. We think about alcohol, we think about drugs, or pornography. And so you might be tempted to go, well, I don't have an addiction to alcohol, drugs, or pornography, so therefore I don't have the giant of addiction in my life. But I think that we should back up there and realize that addiction impacts us all, and we can be addicted to a variety of things. Like, I know that there are some addictions that can cause you to end up on the 6 o'clock news, right? So if you're a drug addict, like, that can put you on the news that night. And so we think, oh, that's an addiction. But I want you to understand that you can be addicted to other things, and it's literally the exact same thing. Yeah, your addiction to something else might not get you on the 6 o'clock news, but it is just as deadly. In fact, it would probably be a good practice for you to stop judging sin based on how society judges sin. So, society thinks that drug addicts, those are the addicts. I don't have that in me. Listen, you maybe do, and it's just as deadly in your life as it is theirs. In fact, the fact that they can get on the 6 o'clock news might mean that they'll get help, whereas you'll go the rest of your life never confronting this giant that's in your life. So we got to look at this, because I think addiction impacts more of us than what we realize. And you might be going, okay, well then what is it that I'm addicted to? I put a list down. See, some people are addicted to money, right? No matter how much money you have to have more money. You're addicted to just having money or getting more money and going after money. Some people are addicted, obviously, to sex. We kind of talked about that. But yeah, porn addiction's a big thing. And let me tell you, the crazy thing about that is all those companies that produce that stuff, they know that, and they know that right now you're isolated and scared and alone. And so they're literally doing anything they can to peddle that drug towards you. It's sick what's going on right now. But it's a big deal. It's an addiction for some people. Some people, it's stuff. They're addicted to stuff or to shopping. You feel pretty cruddy about your day. How are you going to solve that problem? Well, I'll just go shopping. I'll go buy something new. Do you need it? Doesn't matter. Do you have the money for it? Doesn't matter, right? That's just as real of addiction as somebody addicted to heroin. It's just the same thing. It's just you have a more socially acceptable way of pursuing your addiction. Some people are addicted to achievement. You can't sit still. You can't rest. You always got to be doing something. If you feel like if you sit still for a second, that you've lost huge amounts of ground. So you've got to achieve. You have to constantly push yourself. You push everyone else around you because you're addicted to that feeling. Some of us, a lot of us, are addicted to noise and just, activity and entertainment. Like, you can't sit quiet. You're constantly scrolling. You're constantly streaming. You're constantly playing. Like, you have to have constant stuff, noise, something to distract you, because you don't want to sit still long enough to think about what's actually happening in your life. Some of us are addicted to pain, physical pain, because internally you have such excruciating internal pain that you have to find a release valve for that, and so you hurt yourself externally to help the internal pain. The problem with that is it doesn't work, and the internal pain's still there, and now you have scars, right? So some people are addicted to that. Some people, are addicted to chemicals. I'm feeling nervous or stressed out or worried or scared or out of control or chaotic. And so I turn to a chemical to alleviate the pressure. Again, the problem is the chemical only lasts for so long, and the problem's still there, so I have to chase the chemical again. And some of us, actually, let me back up. All of us are addicted to approval. All of us are addicted to approval. And in fact, you might be sitting there watching and go, no, actually, I'm not addicted to approval. And you'll say, I don't care what people think about me. Let me tell you my experience, and you can disagree with me. You'd be wrong, but you can disagree with me. And you can say, I don't care about people's approval. My experience is this, that the people that say, I don't care what people think about me, are usually the biggest addicts in the area of approval. Because even just you having to fight back about that means that you have a problem there, right? We're all addicted to that. Social media has played on that. Like, we put things out, we go down the black hole of constantly having to filter and produce and get the likes and get the views and all that kind of stuff. We're all addicted to that. Here's the deal. Addiction is anything, really, that you just can't live without. It's a habit that you can't break. And it's a habit that ultimately begins to own you. Again, it might not get you on the 6 o'clock news, and praise God you don't have an addiction that doesn't get you on the 6 o'clock news, but it's still something that is owning you. Let me tell you 2 truths that I know that are absolutely true about addiction. Here's the first one. Number 1, addiction is a symptom of another problem. Addiction is just a symptom of another problem. See, we often think like, hey, I got an addiction, so that's the problem. We circle that's my problem. But it's actually a symptom of something else. If you ask anybody who is chemically addicted, a drug addict, an alcoholic, if you ask anybody that is chemically addicted, they will tell you this is absolutely true. That before they were chemically addicted, there was something internally that was messed up. They either had pain, rejection, fear, they felt chaotic, there was some type of dysfunction, there was some type of trauma, they felt insecure. Insecure is a huge one. There was some internal problem they did not know how to handle, and they found a chemical, and that chemical took the edge off. Now, eventually what happens is you become dependent on the chemical, and then you become addicted to the chemical. But behind the addiction is the problem. We have to peer behind. Like, hey, I feel like I have to shop or spend a ton of money or cut myself or I have to distract myself constantly. What's the bigger problem? There's something behind the scenes. Or I have to feel like if I have to watch porn. Like, what's the bigger problem? There's something behind the scenes that's actually the issue. And the problem, of course, is this, is that you pursue that addiction, but it doesn't solve the problem. Like for long-term recovery, to get over an addiction, you have to look behind the addiction to see the problem, which leads me to the second thing. The second thing I know is absolutely true about addiction, and that is this. All addictions overpromise but underdeliver. And by the way, that's true of literally all sin. You could say all sin overpromises and underdelivers, and that would be accurate. But addictions are especially this way. Because what they tell you is this. It doesn't matter, fill in the blank what your addiction is, but what it tells you is this. Are you feeling panicked, insecure, rejected, lonely, afraid? Whatever it is that feeling is, just do me one more time. Just come back, take one more drink, watch this video, go buy this stuff, do this, do that. Whatever the action is, it will make you feel better. It will make you feel better. It'll make you feel warm and cozy. In fact, if you feel out of control, a lot of times you go, you know what, I'm going to go back to this thing, this addiction that's actually what is making my life out of control. But right now I feel scared and alone. And so I'm actually going to go back because at least I'm doing something. I feel in control because I'm going back to the addiction. All addictions are just symptoms of a larger problem. And all addictions are really overpromising but under-delivering. And so the thing is like, how do we get out of this cycle? Because the truth of the matter is what driving addiction is, fear, pain, rejection, hurt, loneliness, despair, depression. If that's what drives us towards the addiction, well, let's have a wake-up call. You're going to walk through a life where you feel fear, pain, loneliness, despair, and times depression. So how do you experience those emotions but not run back to the addiction? What we're going to see is this. Is that first of all, and this is going to sound really like hallmarky and just simple, and I'm going to unpack it, but ultimately you have to turn to Christ to solve the problem that's driving the addiction. You have to turn to Christ rather than turn to the addiction. We've been talking about David and Goliath, and I want to look back at that story because there's a part in it that we could skip over pretty easy, but I think it kind of reveals this idea that we run to one thing in hopes that it will solve the problem when really we need to run to Christ. So we're going to look at it. It's going to be in 1 Samuel 17. To set it up, David's kind of had enough at this point of Goliath's trash talk. So he goes, I'm going to fight him. And so he goes to King Saul, and he says, hey, Saul, I'm going to fight this guy. And here's what King Saul says in verse 33. Saul replied, you're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man. He has been a warrior from his youth. Now, at first glance, this looks like maybe Saul's got some concern for him. Like, hey, you're a young guy. You're not a warrior. You're not trained. I'm scared for your safety. Like, it seems like he might be a little bit concerned for him, right? But I think that's false concern. I think it's a false way of showing it because I think really Saul was kind of threatened by David. I mean, what we know about Saul is this. Saul was a big guy. He was a tall guy. It says that he was a head taller than anyone else. He was a warrior. He had been to battle already. Like when David was when Goliath was trash talking, it was Saul that should have gone out and fought him as the king. But the king's hiding in his tent. He's terrified. So when a teenage boy comes up to Saul and says, hey, I'm willing to fight him, I think what Saul's trying to do is point out to David, hey, you're weak. You're incapable. You're vulnerable. You're not powerful enough. I think he's trying to show him that. But here's David's response. David says to Saul, your servant's been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, I struck it, I rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he's defied the armies of the living God. Now look at verse 37, because it's really important. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. This is just a side note, but what an unbelievable truth. Listen, the Lord who has rescued me will rescue me. The Lord who did will do it, right? I could count on him in the past. I could count on him in the future. So David says, you know what? I've had more training than what you've realized. I'm good. I think Saul was trying to say, hey, look at how weak and vulnerable and exposed you are. You can't do it. David says, listen, I got more experience than what you realize. The Lord's always been with me. The Lord will be with me. So Saul says, okay, fine, go ahead. You can fight him. But look at what he does next. Verse 38. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around, because he was not used to them. So Saul says, look, it doesn't change the fact that you killed a lion and a bear, that's great, but it doesn't change the fact that you're not a warrior and that you're exposed and that you're vulnerable. Let me put my armor on you. It will cover up your vulnerability. It will cover you up. It'll wrap you up tight. It'll make you look stronger. It'll make you feel stronger. It'll get you ready for battle. Let me put my armor on you. Listen, this is what we do when we feel vulnerable, when we feel exposed, when we feel scared, when we feel afraid, when life feels chaotic, when it feels out of control, when we feel powerless. What we do is we often run and try to cover up with something. And that thing that we often try to run and cover up with is called addiction. Fill in the blank for what yours is. But that's what we do. I'm feeling insecure about this. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling out of control. I'm going to drink. I'm going to watch porn. I'm going to shop. I'm going to crank up the noise of everything in my life so I don't have to feel the feelings that I'm feeling. Like we run back to a false sense of security. We hide behind an armor thinking that, I don't like feeling vulnerable or exposed, so I better cover up as good as I can with something. The problem is that it just doesn't work. Like I said earlier, like the high wears off or the video ends or the noise eventually has to die down and you have to sit in silence for a second. Like eventually the distraction stops working and the problem that's causing you to feel vulnerable and exposed, that's still sitting there, right? David rejects it. Look at what he says in verse 39. I can't go in these, he said. I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in a pouch on his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. So David said, look, the Lord who rescued me will rescue me. I'm not going to hide behind this ill-fitting armor. I'm going to trust God. And he went out with God's Spirit, and we know the end of the story. But I'm telling you, the great temptation when we are feeling like turmoil and out of control and I don't know what to do, the great temptation is to hide behind something that'll make me feel better for just a little bit of time. And if you're dealing with that temptation, can I tell you, it has been plaguing mankind since the very beginning. Adam and Eve, all the way at the beginning of this whole story, they are living in perfect harmony, perfect peace, no turmoil, no guilt, no shame, no feeling of powerlessness or chaotic, no problem. In fact, look what it says in Genesis chapter 2, verse 25. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. They were totally exposed to the world around them, totally exposed to one another, totally exposed before God. No shame, no guilt, no problem. They were totally at peace. But we know what happens. They choose to eat a fruit. right? The one thing they couldn't do, they choose to do. Their eyes are open. They realize, oh my gosh, we're guilty of sin. Like all of a sudden, guilt and shame and all this stuff that they had never experienced before comes flooding into them. And then they have a bigger problem. They hear God coming. And look what they do. Chapter 3, verse 8. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Oh, did you hear that? That's God. Let's go. And so they hid. Listen, from that day forward, man's response to feeling like, I don't feel good, I don't like this feeling. Man's response of like, it's chaotic, I feel guilty, I feel ashamed, I don't know what else to do. Man's response has been to run from God, not run to God. That is built in, hardwired to us. Well, I'm going to run and I'm going to hide. I'm going to hide behind a bush, or I'm going to put on this addiction. I'm going to do whatever I can. It'll make me feel better for a second. I'm going to hide where I can. So look at what God does. Verse 9, the Lord called to the man, where are you? It's not like God didn't know, but God was essentially saying, do you know where you are? And look at verse 10. Adam answered, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. It's been man's response since that day forward. That when we are in this moment of uncertainty and like, I don't know what I feel, isolated, alone, rejected, scared, everything's out of control, I don't know what else to do. Rather than just be honest and go to God, what do? We run and we hide. We put on, this addiction that'll make us feel, secure for a minute or safe for a minute. Or if we're feeling rejected, it'll make us feel loved. Or if we're feeling insecure, it'll make us feel a bit better. Or if we're feeling alone, it'll brighten our mood. But the problem is that it never works, and we're running to the wrong thing, and we're hiding behind the wrong thing, and what we need to do is something different. So my question is this: how on earth do you and I break this giant down? Like, how do we get out from underneath its grips? Because again, we know we're going to experience fear and all these other emotions. Like, we know we're going to have to deal with life. So how do we turn from the thing that's the addiction and turn to God? Well, let's look at three things. Here's the first one. We need to bring our vulnerability to Christ. In other words, what I'm saying to you is this: you need to do the exact opposite of what Adam did. You need to run to God instead of running to something else. Hiding behind, your addiction that's like a bush or a armor. I'm not going to run to that. I'm going to run to Christ. Like, I think a powerful moment will come in your spiritual development and mine too, when we are finally like, you know what? Why am I hiding anyways? Like, it's stupid. Let me just go to God and tell him, like, Lord, I am feeling. And then name it. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling alone. I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling chaotic. I'm feeling out of control. I'm feeling isolated. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling whatever it is. I'm feeling this way. Name it out loud to the Lord. This is how I'm feeling. And then go one step further. I'm feeling this way because, and then fill in the blank. I'm feeling rejected because of, I'm feeling scared because of, I'm feeling isolated and alone, or I'm feeling, overwhelmed because of, and name it. And then go the next step. So I'm feeling this, and it's because of this. And Lord, I know that this one addiction is calling out to me saying, you know how you'll feel better? Right now, just come and one more time. Just one more time. It'll make you feel better. Just one more time. And so, Lord, I feel this way. It's because of this, and the addiction's talking to me. And then go one step further and say, but help me see the truth, that it will not fulfill me, that the only solution to this problem is found in you. Like, help me see the truth. Give me strength to stand up underneath this, and help me find you in the midst of this. Reach out to the Lord in the midst of that struggle. Can I tell you, as somebody who's walked a road, of addiction and failure in this, let me tell you, I realized something, because I would get on the right track and then I'd fall. I'd get on the right track and fall. I'd do, get some time, fall off, and all that kind of stuff. Over and over and over again, this happened. It finally dawned on me that when I was continually falling down, I was never praying to the Lord before I pursued the addiction. I was praying to the Lord after I pursued the addiction. I was going, God, forgive me. I know I shouldn't have done that. Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry, God. Please forgive me. I always prayed after I took part in the addiction. I never prayed on my way there when it was talking to me. I never said, Lord, I'm feeling overwhelmed and just burdened and scared and upset and depressed, and I'm feeling this way. Like, help me in the midst of this. I never prayed on the way, I prayed after. Listen, we take our vulnerability to Christ. This is who I am, where I am. This is what's causing it. I need help right here, right now. Let me tell you, vulnerability is scary, but it is only scary if the person you're being vulnerable to is not trustworthy. God is trustworthy. Run to him. Do not go the road of Adam. Run to him. Do not hide. But I'm going to be honest with you, okay? If you're with me this far, let me just push you a little bit further. If you do say, hey, I know there's some areas of addiction in my life, let me just tell you, that one, taking your vulnerability to Christ is not enough. It's just not enough. Because I guarantee you've tried to do this before and you go, I still fail. You need number 2. And here's what number 2 is. We reach out to others. We reach out to others. Yeah, we take our vulnerability to Christ, but then we reach out to others. You need to understand the lie has been told to you your whole life that you're capable to fight this battle on your own and just figure it out, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're not. You're not capable. You weren't meant to be capable. We reach out to others and rely on others and say, hey, I need some help. Help me in this. There's a miracle in the New Testament where Jesus brings Lazarus back from the dead. And Lazarus was his friend, and Jesus goes up to the tomb, and he's been dead for 3 days. And Jesus says to Lazarus, hey, Lazarus, come out. Now, here's the crazy thing. The moment that Jesus says, Lazarus, come out, air floods into Lazarus's lungs. His heart that hasn't been beating for 3 days starts jumping. Air comes in, his arms move, he stands up, and he walks out. At that moment, Lazarus is fully alive, right? The moment that Jesus said, come on, he is fully alive. But look at what Jesus says next. John chapter 11, verse 44. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And then Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. See, here's the crazy thing. Lazarus was fully alive, but he was still wrapped in linen made for dead people. There was still death clinging to him. He was alive, but there was death wrapped around him. And so what Jesus says is to the people around him, help unravel him. Tear off the stuff that's holding on to him. He is alive. Now you unravel it. Listen, there's so many of us who Christ can set free, but we need some additional help from his community to come along and unravel the layers that is wrapped around us, all the lies and all the junk that's just wrapped around us. We need faithful people to walk up and start taking that off of us and helping us. So yeah, if you're a drug addict, that can mean rehab, right? But if you have another addiction, that might mean you need to go to counseling. Or if you have something that maybe isn't to that level yet, maybe you need to reach out to some friends who are faithful and get some accountability around yourself. Because I'm going to bet that you've prayed a lot of prayers like, God, just set me free of this, and then you just keep going back to it. But I'm also going to bet you've probably never reached out to people. And even if you say, well, no, actually I have, did you tell them the full extent of what was going on? I'm going to bet you've been battling by yourself for a long time. Now, James 5:16 says this, we confess our sins to one another and pray for one another that we might be healed. There's a reason that's in the Bible. Because we can be fully alive in Christ, but still have some death hanging on to us. And we need some folks to come along, faithfully pray for us and help strip that back from our lives. So yeah, we bring our vulnerability to Christ. We reach out to the community others. And then number 3 is this, and this is what's going to keep you from doing number 2. So this is why I added it here. We reject shame. The one thing that's going to keep you, you know that you can talk to God about this because God's watching it all anyways. But the one thing that's going to keep you from doing number 2 is shame. Because you have this idea in your head that you have to somehow be put together all the time. And you can't let people in and let them know that you aren't perfect or that you're dealing with something. But we reject shame. Shame is what keeps us in the tomb. We reject shame. We move forward. You know, Paul wrote the majority of the New Testament. And Paul had some type of thorn in his flesh. We don't know what that was. It could have been a health issue, might have been a group of people. We have no idea what it was, but he had something. Listen to what he wrote about here in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. Here's what he's saying. I'm not going to act like I have it all together. I'm weak. I'm willing to talk about the fact that I'm weak. I'm willing to talk about the fact that I got some things that I got to work through. I'm willing to own up that it's not all perfect and put together and filtered and right. Like I'm going to own up to that. In fact, Paul goes so far to say, not only am I going to open up about it, I'm going to boast about it. I'm going to be boastful of the fact that I'm weak, because in my weakness is where Christ appears the most strong. And that's why he says in verse 10, look at 2 Corinthians 12:10, that is why for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Here's what he's saying. He's saying, look, when I acknowledge my weakness to the Lord, when I acknowledge my weakness to Christ, and then when I acknowledge my weakness to Christ's community, that is where I find strength. It is when I acknowledge it to Christ himself and to his community, that's where I find strength. Now, if you're still with me, just hold on for one more second. I'm not saying if you have an active addiction that you should walk around boasting about the fact that you have an active addiction. That's not the point of this passage. Okay? We don't think the thorn in the flesh was a sin issue. So that's not the point of this passage. But what I am saying is this, is that the moment you drop your guard and just admit to folks, hey, by the way, I have an issue. There's something going on. I brought it to Christ, now I'm bringing it to you. I need help. That is the moment where you've acknowledged your weakness, and in your weakness is where you might find strength through Christ. That we say, I'm rejecting shame so I can come out of this and start finding some freedom. I'm rejecting shame. And I will tell you this too, for those of you who say maybe you've walked the road of addiction and you've come out the other side, maybe a little bit, you're starting to see some freedom. We also reject shame, and we tell the story of how God set us free. There's a lot of people in churches who go, yeah, I used to be addicted to pornography. I would never say that out loud because it's too embarrassing. No. We reject shame. We say, I used to be addicted to pornography, but God set me free. Like, we give glory to the Father when he does something in our lives. We reject shame, right? Here's the deal. I don't know where you are right now. I have no idea, but I do know this, that in this world of chaos and pain and despair and, all these different, everything feels out of control and chaotic and weird, and you're tossed back and forth and you're isolated and you're alone. Like, it is really easy in that moment for addiction to start talking to you, and it will tell you this, just one more time. I'll make you feel better. It'll feel right. It'll be okay. Let me tell you, you need to look at that addiction and say, you are a liar. You need to take your vulnerability, where you are, that emotion that you're feeling, take it to Christ. Say, this is what I'm feeling. This is why I'm feeling it. Help me in this moment. And then you need to reach out to some other folks and say, hey, I need some support, some accountability. I'm not telling you to broadcast it to the world. Not everyone deserves your truth. But there are some trusted people that you know that you can go to. And so reach out to those folks, bring them in, and reject shame and say, hey, you know what? I want freedom. Forget shame. I want freedom from this. Right? There is another side of this, because as we begin to follow Christ and his word, as we take our issues to Christ, as we engage his community, as we reject shame and start walking into freedom, they start taking the death off of us and throwing it to the side. Listen, that's when Jesus Christ walks onto the battlefield and slaughters the giant of addiction in your life once and for all. And you can be set free, because it's happened for a tremendous amount of people, and it can happen for you. Just do what they've done. Do not go the road of Adam, which is to hide. Go the road of Christ, right? Hope to see you in Zoom tonight.
'Cause all my life you have been